Hello everyone, Dr. Zane again, and I wanted to provide a review of Chapter 5, Operant Behavior from Science and Human Behavior. As before, I won't cover every topic Skinner covers in the chapter, but I wanted to give you an overview and my take on it. So we're moving from Chapter 4, which is all about reflexive behavior, and you know by now that reflexes are a different category of responses of organisms. It's the stimulus response. I think Pavlov, easiest example. But now Skinner is talking about a three-term paradigm. Mostly right now he's actually talking about two-term response consequence. But as you understand, it's really a three-term. But he's focusing on this chapter the addition of the stimulus following a response. He defines operant behavior as behavior which has some effect upon the surrounding world, meaning that it's influenced by its interaction with the social physical environment, and it is distinct from reflexes. Skinner, of course, admits that we have reflexes, but this learned behavior, this operant, this behavior that operates on the world, involves most of the practical problems in humans' affairs, as he says. The law of effect is a major concept. You know what it is already. There's a nearby presentation on Thorndike, E.L. Thorndike, who actually postulated this in the early 1900s. And it obviously had major effect on Skinner. And he talks about it on page 60, Thorndike and his cat experiments in the puzzle box. So look at the nearby presentation on Thorndike. But in this chapter on operant behavior, the law of effect certainly has applicability and relevance. Skinner goes on to talk about the learning curves that were first invented by Thorndike. Skinner says that they attempt to show a quantitative process of behavior, and that was a big deal about the learning curves. You could collapse a lot of different organisms' data together and show a decreasing trend of errors, if you will, or an increasing trend of learning whatever the task is. Thorndike called this stamping in of an act, stamping in. But Skinner, in this section of his chapter, is trying to point out that the learning curve depicts learning, but it doesn't show actual learning, the process of learning. I hope you understand the difference. Okay. Skinner first says that the learning curves are sensitive to many factors, environmental factors. Look at what he noted, the makeup of the box, the possibility of different responses being able to perform the escape of Thorndike's box, patterns of stimuli. So learning is certainly influenced by all those environmental events. But Skinner, as I said, is saying that the learning curve shows the results of the behavior, the speed at which the cats got out of the box. But it doesn't show why they got out of the box or how they responded or why they responded in the way they did. All right? Skinner talks about the all or none nature of responding. Now, reflexive, respondent behaviors are all or none. If the stimulus goes on, turns on, the puff of the puff of air into the eye, you will get a response or you will not. Okay? But for operant behavior, it's different than that, Skinner postulated. And it's not an all or none, yes or no sort of thing in operant behavior. And he then came down on the phrase of probability of responding. And the probability of making a response in any one situation is somewhere between 0 and 100%, of course. And Skinner's making the point here, folks, that depending upon the arrangement of variables, of stimuli in the environment, you can increase or decrease the probability of responding. And that, again, is another difference between respondent or classical conditioning and operant conditioning. The stimulus turns on or turns off turns on or does not turn on the response. In operant conditioning, the stimuli or the stimulus increases or decreases the probability of responding in the future. Skinner spends a lot of time in the chapter talking about these explanatory fictions and mentalisms that we've covered in previous chapters, but it's interesting here because he's showing us that when it comes down to probability of responding and operant behavior, we can explain the influences of behavior from the context of the social physical environment. And again, we don't have to rely on these mentalisms. An example, if there's a high probability of responding, we, with our psychoanalytic language, talk about the individual being enthusiastic, or he's a fan of baseball. So what does that mean? It just means there's a high likelihood of a person attending a sporting event, right? Or if he's an inveterate gambler, right? Well, all that means is there's a high likelihood of behaving and exhibiting gambling behavior. So it's, again, circular reasoning in a way, right? Skinner also illustrates in this chapter his adherence to scientific methodology. To thoroughly study a behavior, we have to have the organism has to have an opportunity to respond. Note the second bullet, competing behaviors must be minimized. So you only want to set up a situation where only one response can occur, the one that you want to see. And we need to specify the conditions under which the performance could be done. So is the light on or off? Is it a sound attenuated chamber? So forth and so on. The details aren't important, but what's important for you to pick up is how Skinner, when he describes his animal experiments, how he's explaining them and describing the conditions like a good scientist would do. We'll stop here and go on to part 2.